My name is Wally Redding, and I'm going to talk about racism and the Catholic Church.
My name is Maceo Hood. I'm a parishioner at St. Vincent's, Germantown. I'm a former parishioner at Immaculate Conception.
My name is Sheila Sharp, and I am a member here at St. Vincent de Paul Church in Germantown.
My name is Anthony Giancaterino, and I'm a member at St. Vincent's de Paul in Philadelphia.
Hi, I'm Kate Giancaterino, and I'm a member of St. Vincent de Paul Parish in Philadelphia.
Jerry Smith, St. Vincent de Paul Catholic Parish.
My name is Robin Smith. I go to a member of St. Vincent de Paul Parish in Germantown.
Carol Vincent. I grew up in South Philly.
My name is Shirley Forrest. I am a convert like Carol.
My name is Charlene Cornish. I am a member of St. Athanasius Parish.
In the Catholic Church, from my experience, I have seen very little racism.
Being raised in various churches in North Philadelphia, the diocese closed those churches that we loved. I just didn't think the diocese cared.
I have belonged to two churches since I joined the Catholic Church, which was St. Catherine's and St. Vincent.
I never experienced that until I came up here in Germantown. St. Catherine's, the people were kind of cold to me. St. Catherine's on Penn Street. That's where I met Miss Shirley and Miss Annie and them. But they weren't friendly. I went to Mass and came home, and that was it. No involvement in the church whatsoever.
When I lived in the suburbs, one Easter Lent, I decided I was going to go to Mass every day. And it was in Huntington Valley, Pennsylvania. And I went, and it was early in the morning because I was on my way to work. And I went in and I sat in Mass, and when Mass was over, the priest came over to me. And I thought, oh, he's just going to welcome me. Well, he didn't. He said to me, why was I there? And I said I was there because I was going to do it for Lent every day. And he says, well, there has to be a black church somewhere around that you could go to. And I felt like, wow.
So as a white person, I don't know if I've really experienced racism personally and at me, but I've observed and I've seen and witnessed racism in the Catholic Church. I've been a Catholic my entire life, and I've seen it happen over time, whether an older black man came into a church one time and was asked to leave because he appeared homeless, appeared like he necessarily was not a member of the church, and instead of welcoming him in, as we are called to do as Catholics, being asked to leave. So that is an experience of racism.
I came to St. Vincent's on and off since '76. I guess I have felt different types of feelings with St. Vincent's.
When we used to visit St. Vincent from St. Catherine's, we always had to sit in the back.
First time I went to the shrine and extended my hand, people looked at me and turned their lips up, and they wouldn't extend their hand. I was so shocked, it hurt my feelings. But I began to understand that that's the way it was back then.
I generally do the Mother's Day walk for breast cancer with my best friend, and we decided that we would go to Mass in that area several years ago. We had been walking, and we decided we would, go on into the church, and we asked the gentleman there if we would be able to use the restrooms, and he said, "Oh, it's broken."
And I don't know why, maybe it was just me, but I always felt that when the people looked at me, they were looking at, some foreigner or somebody who's from outer space or whatever, because they were not friendly.
The gentleman said to us that the bathroom was broken, but when several white women came in and needed to use the bathroom, he directed them to it.
At the time, I didn't know anything about how they measure whether a parish should close, but those parishes were more than just places where you worship. They were community centers. They were a place to engage. They were a place to where you could come and the word I'm searching for is.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like, wait a minute, did I not just ask him for the bathroom? And we were in our clothing for the walk. We had on our t-shirts, we had on our tickets or whatever you want to call those. We had those on. So it was obvious that we were a part of the walk, which is right in their neighborhood.
It was a place, it was a sense of community. If you had needs, your needs were met, both spiritually and physically.
Sometime as a Catholic, I kind of feel that I'm on an island by myself. I don't see a number of Catholic families involved in our Catholic church.
The church that comes to mind for me is Most Precious Blood. Most Precious Blood was at 29th and Dolphin. And I spent 7 years at that school. It was a school and a church. It was a parish. And at the time, there was a lot of gang violence. We're talking 70s. But that church was an island of safety. It was an island where you could go and, get your needs cared.
So I proceeded to get up and go back to the gentleman and said, excuse me, but did you not just tell me that the bathroom was not available to me?
Since then, I haven't experienced it overtly, but there's been subtle tones. One of the things, we merged with 2 other parishes, and our parish was, I keep saying that our parish was, before the merge, was about 40% African American. And when we merged, there was a parish that was basically African American. And I remember sitting in Mass and feeling really uncomfortable because it's like in high school, where all the blacks sit here and lunch and all the whites sit there and lunch. And it kind of felt like that. And I talked to some people and they just felt uncomfortable and they came up with all kinds of excuses, but nobody seemed to want to bridge that gap.
I've been coming here, oh my God, I think since the late 80s or early 90s. And I've always liked St. Vincent's because I thought it was a welcoming parish. But we do have people in here that are above the blacks, and you can tell.
And it was not easy. We had our part, they had their part, and there may have been some racism involved in that. That was my feeling. I was original member of the parish council, and where I could, I voiced my opinion.
They're just not friendly, they're not accepting, and they shut you down when you try to say something. They shut down your ideas, which is a reason why I won't get on parish council, because I need to be heard.
I remember going through different priests, different situations, and I think if I look back over it, that I was not really part of it.
So when the diocese closed it, I thought that was right. I didn't think they cared, and it was a black community. So why are you closing all the black churches in North Philadelphia? I mean, that's the big thing that I remember. They kept closing churches in North Philadelphia. I didn't know anything about the diocese plan then. And this is all the way up in the high school. Okay, they kept closing churches. It's almost, I told the bishop once at Immaculate, that it was almost like Dunkirk. They kept closing churches. I don't know if you guys know about Dunkirk, but Dunkirk, they drove us to the beach and we had to get on the boats. And I just felt they didn't care about the black community because they were closing black churches. And I remember the bishop saying to me, don't make it about race. Because he was actually sitting right next to me. Right? And that was my feeling. I felt like it was like Dunkirk. They just kept closing these communities that were, I felt, beloved by the black community, a place where you could go to get your needs met.
We have people that definitely try to overtalk us, but the thing that gets me is church is like a Sunday meeting place only. So after church is over, you don't hear from these people. You try to get their numbers, they're not going to give them, or they're not going to accept the calls. So it's very evident, that we do have racism here.
I belonged to parish council at one time. Was my voice heard? I don't think so. Was I seen? I don't think so. Was things going on around the church that I knew things about? I spoke up, and it fell on deaf ears as I saw it.
As I look at church every Sunday, I see a smaller number of African Americans involved in the Catholic faith.
When we started talking about Black Lives Matter, there was some tension among some folks. And I remember sitting in my pew where I always sit, and the couple that was sitting behind me were a white couple. And I heard him say something like, well, what do they want? And I thought, oh, wow. And I didn't know how to approach him. I didn't even know if I wanted to approach him. And somebody else had said to me not too long after that they had heard him say something like that also. Now I have to admit, in the couple of years that have passed, I've seen him mellow out some and be more accepting of differences.
I was named St. Vincent's Man of the Year at one time for Interfaith Council Man of the Year. I've never heard any more about it. I didn't know if there was still an Interfaith Council Man of the Year, but I was selected at that point, and then about 2 years ago I realized, how could I be part of these things if I was not considered Catholic at that point? So there was a lot of things that was going on that maybe not racism per se, but I was not connected with the Catholic Church per se, and it didn't make me feel as if I belonged to the Catholic Church.
I think racism is something that I didn't always think about. Being a white person, it wasn't something that I needed to think about, and that's, in more recent years have realized how much of a privilege that is.
In the beginning, I just felt as though I was just a person that gave my donations. I didn't feel connected. I didn't feel a part of. I would say possibly in the last 10 years, I've felt like I'm more committed to St. Vincent's. I'm more concerned.
As a matter of fact, I can't remember, we had a group to try to bridge the racism years ago, and I went to a few meetings, but I think the white people was there for show. I don't think that they were actually trying to make a difference. So I guess when black people see that the push is not on, it kind of like filtered out.
There was times where I'd walk through the streets of Germantown and didn't feel connected. There was no connection with people that I knew that lived in the neighborhood and St. Vincent's. Now, present, current, I'll go back a little further.
We cannot be silent. So for us to be talking about racism, talk about race, we have to. That's been the original sin of the country. It's what shaped all of our institutions, and our society has been shaped by racism, and particularly white supremacy. And so I think the church has an obligation and a duty to speak about it, to speak out against it, to name it.
I think something about St. Vincent's is that we're a community that tries, and that tries to welcome each other and tries to reach out our hands to each other. But I think we can also become complicit in that then, and sort of think that that's okay and that's enough. And I think something, while it's not an overt sense of racism, but it's a sense of the system that we're a part of, that we could always do more. And we could always speak up louder and work harder together to combat racism and other ills of our society.
You know, since I've been coming, we've had different groups about trying to deal with racism over the years. It's hot and heavy, and then all of a sudden, it just kind of filters out. You don't hear about it anymore.
When I say bring us together, I know one of the things that Vincent had talked about was systemic change. So with systemic change, don't just give us soup, right? Don't just give us soup and bread. How can we cure the issues that require us to have soup and bread? And obviously there's racial disparities about those who need soup and bread, right? So I think we can do some more work on systemic change, right? On getting to the roots of why we are at this stage in the first place.
I also think that means that the church needs to be comfortable questioning power. Racism is held because of power, and you know, the bishop of in Texas, after some of the shootings, he explicitly named, in his response to the bishop's letter on racism, talked about the power of whiteness and the power of racism that actually shapes our country. And that's what we need more of the church to be doing from the top. And then as members of the church, we need to be speaking out about it as well.
I think in some ways just being a part of the Catholic Church.
As far as St. Vincent's is concerned, is racism still here? Yes, it is. Can we bridge the gap? I think people just have to have a different mindset.
And then second of all, we have to be willing to deal with power structures, even if that means putting us outside of the power by taking it on. So, you know, speaking up when current elected officials may be pushing some things we like, but if they're pushing racist ideology, we have to speak out against that, even if that means losing something we've accrued as power.
We could do more, you know, that we could speak up more about the history of you know, the Black sisters in the church, of our strong Latino community.
But I do find that when people, they kind of step out, like it's going to be fearful, but I got to do it anyway.
I will move currently to the regime that we have now. I see a completely different makeup of the people, of the establishment, of the hierarchy at the church, where it feels like people are inclusive. They're trying, not saying it's going to happen, but I see people coming together as one.
I think that a day that goes by that we're quiet is a day that we let it exist. And so in this time, in this era, speaking out, or whether it's racism against immigrants coming in over the border, or whether it's just racism in our own cities around black and white, of white people being racist against black people, we need to speak out about it first and foremost.
And I think as someone who's grown up in the Catholic Church, I think that's part of the racism of the Catholic Church, is that we never talked about it. We never talked about our history. We whitewashed our history. Made people who weren't white. And I think that's a deep sense of the racism in our church. And that there's so much that we could talk about there and uncover and recognize. And I don't think we can ever reconcile it, but we can try. And I think that's something that hasn't happened yet.
I don't know what we can really do to change it, because you have to change people's hearts.
Mm-hmm. I hope that people who are considering the Catholic faith will look beyond those things that have been said about the Catholic faith that were negative.
You're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. In this particular case, there's no in between.
I can't say that we successfully have, because we've seriously thought about racism, the racism within ourselves, and how we could dialogue with each other about it. It hasn't been easy. Hasn't been easy for me most of my life, whether I was in church or outside of church.
I believe that when you come into St. Vincent's, that when I talk to people of any color, that we can talk to one another. I don't have to agree with you, you don't have to agree with me. But one thing's for certain, we can express our opinion without understanding there's going to be an attack on me after I leave. That because we are people that are human, that we can talk to one another and not feel that there's going to be a problem after.
It's a wonderful opportunity for us to evangelize and to encourage other people to look at the Catholic religion.
And also, a lot of times, actually, we are called to be of service, which is a critical role as Catholics. But sometimes in our service, we actually sometimes replicate biases and racism through our actions or how we're viewing people. And so instead of it being of service as people together and understanding the causes of why people are in situations or understanding the challenges and recognizing people as equals, sometimes in our service we can look down on folks too, unintentionally, but that's also been a way of racism where I've done that when I was younger.
I hope that people who are considering the Catholic faith will look beyond those things that have been said about the Catholic faith that were negative.
When we have on our emblem, all are welcome, I truly believe in my heart, everyone at St. Vincent are welcome, and their thinking is welcome. Their whole vision about them are welcome. I can come over to anybody and talk and have a conversation with them, and we can laugh and joke with one another. And that's what I think church community is all about.
Thank you. All right. This girl is